Good morning and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns Market Review. It's Sunday, July 22nd, 2018. So my name's Tom Luongo, and I want to thank all your subscribers for your support, as always. And let's get to things. One bit of bookkeeping to clear up here. On Wednesdays, we did one of these on Wednesday, and on Wednesdays, we're going to do kind of a midweek market report. And then on Sunday, which I think is the more important one, because that's going to give you weekly closing numbers, and it's going to potentially give you monthly closing numbers, because obviously if the Friday of that week is the last day of the month, then we get both weekly and monthly closing prices. And sometimes, once or twice a year, we also get a quarterly close. And so we can tie a nice big bow around all the markets on certain weekends. And so the Sunday report, I think is the more valuable one, because it'll give you some idea about weekly closing prices. And that's what we're going to focus on the Sunday reports, how we closed. And the Wednesday reports, we're going to focus on how we want to see the markets close and how we think they're going to close. And there I can play around with some probability statistics and whatnot. So let's get right to it. All right. So big week in the culture war. And really, it's kind of the culture war and the trade war, the things that are dominating the headlines. And obviously the dust up between Whoopi Goldberg and Judge Jeanine Pirro on the Political View the other day certainly dominated the headlines, and it might cost Whoopi her job, and well-deserved, to be honest with you. It's not acceptable behavior to throw people off the set, spit in their face, call them inappropriate racial epithets. There's been a couple of reports of Whoopi using a particularly nasty epithet for an Arab, seeing as Jeanine Pirro is Italian, like me, and a good New York Italian girl like me. It's or good New York Italian, not girl, obviously. And it highlights where we are, and it highlights the problem. When Pirro accused Whoopi of having Trump derangement syndrome, she immediately got triggered, lost her mind, and then went crazy. Now, the interesting part about it is she held it together for about 15 seconds. If you go onto YouTube and watch the exchange, which I find interesting is that she held it together because first what she did was she defined the problem. All this, I've never seen so much hate. I've never seen anybody starting a conversation talking about how Mexicans are rapists, which Trump hasn't said, and that one never said, and two hasn't said in quite a long time. But she still lives in that in 2016 talking points, and then moves from the specifying the problem to implementations. Like, I don't know how to fix this, and that's actually telling me that Whoopi's brain is still turned on, but she can't let go of the real issue. She still has a process. But the input information that she has is faulty, and therefore it taints her entire process, and everything for her is falling apart. And then she just starts screaming at people because she's getting information and a perspective that she refuses to accept because of her faulty input data. And it's very important that you understand that this is happening on the right as well as the left. And that's unfortunate. I love Trump, what he's doing, but he's not a cult. He's just a man with his faults. So remember that. And so we have Whoopi losing her mind on the culture war. We have James Gunn, the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, getting fired by Disney because of some old pedophilic tweets that the man wrote. Whether in jest or not, it doesn't matter. And what I find interesting is now the left entertainment, the edgy left entertainers like the Sarah Silvermans and the Bill Maher's are doubling down on this and saying it's not fair, and then they're doubling down on the pedophilia jokes and everything else, and they don't realize how much this hurts their own cause. And this is where they are, and they're not using their brains; they're just abreacting, and it's pretty ugly. On the other front, on the official front, so these guys are kind of the shock troops, right? And in a post I wrote on Friday, I described this problem, and this lack of communication is going to lead to a civil war, and it's being stoked by people like the FBI and the CIA and the NSA. And we finally got the Carter Page FISA application. Heavily redacted, but it's pretty obvious that, those guys are the vanguard of the political elites, the Davos crowd, whatever you want to call them, the globalists, the shadow government, not the deep state. The deep state works hand in hand with the shadow government. The deep state is the unelected bureaucracy, the permanent government. The shadow government are the people who stand behind them, the ones who make sure that the deep state stays in power. Okay, and there's two different terms, honestly, and they're all aligned against Trump at this point, and they're all setting up for either an impeachment or a 25th Amendment challenge to his competency. Got to watch all this. Okay. And at the same time, all of Trump is like dealing with all that stuff post Helsinki summit with Putin, where I'm sure he got a tremendous amount of information that he was not happy about. The Chinese are heavily devaluing and rapidly devaluing the yuan in response to Trump's declaration of a trade war. So we've got a declaration of open civil war by the intelligence community here in the United States, along with an open trade war and currency war that's now in effect all across markets and all across the world. None of this is going to end well. It's always going to end in a sovereign debt crisis, because that's what happens here, especially if there's any kind of hot war, which I sincerely doubt will happen here. There's going to be a whole lot of saber rattling and a whole lot of positioning and hybrid war stuff. And I mean by hybrid war, economic war, cyber war, those kinds of things that are not openly kinetic war. And the hybrid war stuff is only going to get worse. And that's one of the things that I'm very much in tune with. For those of you who are new subscribers, to me, it's the hybrid war that is actually the war. And I believe we've been at World War III with the Russians and the Chinese for 4 years now. So, and I think that Trump is actually trying to end that. So so that's where we are, and it's only going to accelerate from here. So let's move on to the charts, and I'll get you out of here. All right, so looking at gold, and I got some feedback on the first one of these I did, and you'll notice that the cursor's a lot bigger, so I hope you can see this. It's about as big as I can make it under Microsoft Windows 10, so we'll see what we can do. All right, so this week on Wednesday, gold was really, really weak, and it was looking like we were going to retest support at around 1208, which is not shown on the chart. It goes back to earlier last year. But we did break down below this support at 1236.50, and we didn't close this week above this level. The close here was around 1232, so this is a very bearish weekly close. But that said, we also had almost maximum pain here, and it'll have to show up later in the volume numbers on the futures contracts to know whether or not this is a spike bottom for this impulse. And this is a huge downtrend here, but you'll notice that there's all these little counter relief rallies, all these little up bars here that have kept this from being that has extended this now 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 weeks. And talk to Martin Armstrong and he'll tell you that it's a 13-week trend cycle. So we're now getting into that range where we're going to probably get a bounce in gold. And so those of you who are long gold and long gold stocks have been feeling a lot of this pain. This may be an opportunity for a short-term or medium-term trade, a 2 to 3 month trade with this week's close. As while this is bearish in the macro sense, in the short-term sense, we should get a bounce here back up towards 1280 or 1300 before potentially going lower if we're going to go lower. This could be the big washout that I've always been worried about, that this move down from 1360 down to 1210 is our big washout move on tight dollar liquidity. And I've been talking about this for about 2 years now, that I feel that was necessary to flush out the rest of the kind of hopeful longs in the gold market. And if you look at the commentary in the gold market, if you go and look on Seeking Alpha or other places, it's pretty ugly. I don't know that it's maximally ugly yet, but it's pretty ugly. And breaking this support level is one of those psychologically damaging moments that could be enough, right? It could be enough. So we'll see. The best we can do is to chart it every week. The probability statistics this week on a reversal are about 53% to the upside and about 40% continued weakness, to give you guys an idea. One of these days, I'll do one of these where I explain what I mean by the probability statistics on this. It's very simple stuff. But just to give you an idea that we're, because of this strong weekly close off of this with this long tail, we are now slightly biased to break to the upside. If there's going to be a break to the if there's going to be a break at all of last week's range, which is wide, we're set up about 55-40 split. Okay, so position yourselves for a short-term trade accordingly. All right, let's look at what I was talking about with the yuan. This is the quarterly chart. I could have dialed into the weekly chart and shown you some real volatility, or I could have dialed into even the monthly chart and shown you what I was talking about. But let's just go over this. You saw this in gold. You see this in a lot of charts. This is the 5-quarter worth of a weak dollar. And during the weak dollar period, the yuan strengthened from about 7 to 6.2. So when the dollar was weak, there's a very strong correlation now between U.S. dollar strength and Chinese yuan weakness. Okay, and it has to, and it makes sense when you stop to think about what is China's real situation, which is that it not only has a massive trade surplus and trade book of business with the U.S., it also has a tremendous book of business with other vulnerable emerging markets. And I keep saying to everybody over and over again that eventually this is not going to be as important as it is right now, but right now is incredibly important. I.e. the dollar yuan exchange rate. Probably on Wednesday we'll sit down. We'll talk about the ruble, right, and explain why the U.S. dollar Russian ruble exchange rate isn't very important, because there's very little overlap between the Russian and the American economy. This is why China is going to be very vulnerable to a trade war from Trump. It's why also emerging Asia, which is the other major trading partner for China, when you lump all of ASEAN or all of emerging Asia, Thailand and Vietnam and Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore, those guys, India, and even to a lesser extent India. When you factor all of that and you think about all that, China has to manage the yuan based on all of those currencies. And what they call the REAR, or the real effective exchange rate, is far more important to China than it is to the U.S. Okay. So, but this is a massive reversal signal. This is telling you that China moved very aggressively the minute Trump started the trade war. Massive reversal signal here. 1 bar after a 5 quarter downtrend, we get this massive 1 bar reversal. In the currency markets, this is unheard of. This is a 12% move in 3 months. And then we pile on another, 0.2 over 6, another 4% in a month. This is this quarter. This is like 3 weeks, right? This is the 3 weeks of July, this quarter. That's it. So we could easily be seeing the yuan back towards 7 by the end of September. That's what this chart is telling us. And if Trump is serious about trying to get China to knuckle under, then the way you can counteract tariffs is you devalue the currency. And since China doesn't have an open capital account, the capital can't flee as quickly, and therefore it's all piling into the Chinese sovereign debt market, which is allowing the PBOC, the Chinese central bank, to inflate the currency with very little cost, and then therefore liquefy the companies, the strategically important companies, domestically. Okay, they can reliquefy the credit markets for specific players while allowing other ones to go busto. And I wrote another article about that earlier last week as well that I think you should review, and to understand the interplay between all of this stuff and the way the currencies interact. So I think China's going to get hurt by this trade war. There's no doubt. And right now we can weather it in the short term because Europe is so weak, and the capital that is and will flee out of Europe will go to the U.S., while China will have to deal with a slowing global trade, and they will have to inflate their balance sheet massively, in effect doing QE, to try and manage the chaos, which they will do. And they've been managing this chaos now for about 6 years with their various property bubbles that have been busted. And President Xi regularly does this, where he'll pop various sectors of the Chinese shadow banking system on purpose, and do that in coordination with a change in U.S. monetary and fiscal policy to create some amount of cover for that change in policy. Very, very smart. Don't underestimate G. All right, now let's look at Bitcoin. So on Wednesday, we talked about how Bitcoin had moved tentatively above $77,000 back up to the 7,400 range. And it's been kind of trading there. There was a little bit of a blip on Friday, but we get into the new week and we're here now. And we had a nice move back up towards 7,600, ran into resistance at the top of this bar. But this is a very strong weekly breakout. And I talked about on Wednesday, you can review the chart review, but you can see how these reversal signals off of the major drop, that there was massive hope here. And then even the earlier one, there was immediate hope and then failure, and then slightly less hope because it took 2 bars to reverse. And then now it's taken 5 bars to reverse, but we're still now having to do the hard work of pushing through this cluster of resistance right here between 7,400 and 7,700. A move above 8,000 would be very strong technically. So is Bitcoin setting up for a second half of the year rally? Very, very possible. All right, that's all I've got for this morning. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back on Wednesday morning. As always, I appreciate all of my subscribers, and we'll talk to you soon. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below the post to this video, and I'll address them directly the next time or in a private blog post. And don't forget to join us over on Slack, where you can ask questions and hang out and do, and be an active member of the community if you feel the need to. All right, you guys take care. You have a great afternoon. Keep your stick on the ice.